A mild March start in Toronto, a bruising night for the Leafs, and Ottawa calling voters back to the polls, while Canada quietly repositions itself between Washington, Europe, and the Arctic. And later in the brief, why a story that's mostly disappeared from U.S. speeches is still keeping Greenlanders on edge. Toronto's weather first. Expect about 12 and sunny. In local politics, Torontonians in 2 ridings now have a date on the calendar. Prime Minister Mark Carney has called federal by-elections for April 13th in University Rosedale and Scarborough Southwest, alongside a third race in Terrebonne, Quebec. The bigger picture here is parliamentary math. The Liberals are sitting at 169 seats, and winning all 3 would put them at 172, a very slim majority. In University Rosedale, the vacancy comes after Chrystia Freeland stepped down to take a voluntary advisory role with Ukraine's president. In Scarborough Southwest, the seat opened when Bill Blair resigned after being appointed High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. And in Terrebonne, this is a do-over after the Supreme Court invalidated the last result, a seat that, at different moments, appeared to swing back and forth by a single vote. Turning to sports, if you're a Leafs fan, it was another tough one. Toronto fell 5-2 to Tampa Bay, with Nikita Kucherov posting 4 assists and hitting 100 points on the season. The key number for Toronto is still the skid, 7 straight without a win since the Olympic break, and now 10 points back of the final Eastern playoff spot. Toronto's stars are getting noticed for the wrong reasons too. Austin Matthews is now 11 games without a goal. And on the soccer side, Toronto FC got something it hasn't had in a while, a clean sheet and a road win. A late goal in the 86th minute delivered a 1-0 victory in Cincinnati, and it was Toronto's first ever win at that stadium. Their next stretch is heavy on home dates, starting with the home opener against the New York Red Bulls. Now, shifting from the familiar to the stakes, trade and Canada's leverage. Canada and the U.S. have resumed face-to-face trade talks, with Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc meeting U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer in Washington. It's the first in-person meeting since President Donald Trump halted negotiations last October. Here's the key point. These talks are happening while tariffs remain in place on a wide range of Canadian goods, including steel, aluminum, automobiles, softwood lumber, and more. And while the broader Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement, CUSMA, is up for renegotiation. That matters because tariff relief is being wrapped into the CUSMA process, which gives the U.S. room to ask for other concessions. 2 that keep coming up in reporting: pressure for greater access to Canada's dairy market and U.S. demands around Canadian content rules for streaming platforms, including requirements to carry Canadian content and contribute funding. What happens next is likely incremental, not dramatic. LeBlanc's office called the meeting constructive and substantive. The risk here is that tariffs become a standing bargaining chip tied to unrelated demands, and that the U.S. could still threaten new tariff tools or even try to restructure or terminate CUSMA, which would raise the baseline cost of exporting into the U.S. A quick related signal: Ottawa is also trying to widen its options elsewhere. Canada and the European Union are signing targeted updates to CETA in Toronto, including a launch toward digital trade talks and revised investment dispute language. And Canada has formalized a comprehensive strategic partnership with Japan, aimed at deeper cooperation in defense, energy, critical minerals, trade, and technology. It's a more political pledge than detailed spending package, but it fits a clear pattern. Canada diversifying relationships as the U.S. track stays unpredictable. And briefly, on diplomacy, Carney also spoke by phone with President Trump yesterday, according to a Prime Minister's office readout. The conversation touched the economy, the Middle East, and trade, with both leaders agreeing to keep in close contact. Now, that forward reference from the top. Greenland. Canada's Governor-General, Mary Simon, is warning that Greenland should remain wary, even though Trump's public push to acquire the territory has largely faded from view since January. Simon's message is less about what's being said right now and more about what the episode did to people living there. Reports of anxiety and turmoil and a lingering fear that the idea could return. Why this matters now is that Greenland sits at the intersection of Arctic security, shipping routes, and geopolitical attention, and the who decides what question is complicated. Denmark controls Greenland's foreign policy and defense, and Simon is emphasizing that the way forward is dialogue between Greenland and Denmark, with Canada signaling support for both. One more orientation line here. The public rhetoric may have cooled, but the strategic incentives haven't vanished. That's why you're hearing Canadian officials keep the topic alive, even when Washington isn't. Before we close, one quick national legal development to keep an eye on. The Supreme Court has ruled Quebec can't bar asylum seekers from accessing subsidized daycare. The court found the rules discriminated against women refugee claimants in practice, because childcare burdens fall disproportionately on women, and because excluding asylum-seeking parents can block them from working and integrating. The order is broad: access regardless of whether the parent holds a work permit. Final piece to watch: April 13 will be a real stress test for the government's numbers in Parliament, and the trade file will be a slow-moving but high-impact negotiation, especially if tariffs remain the day-to-day reality while CUSMA talks drag on. And in the Arctic, even quiet stories can keep shaping how countries plan for the next round. That's your Daily News Bite for Monday, March 9th.